Once and Future is done. The union's out. Once and Future has come to a close so far, or has it?
It's come to a climax and a pause, I suppose.
Yes, yeah, because we've got Coda November next year.
Yeah. Which, I mean, certainly it's wide open for because don't know what could happen after this one because it does feel rather neatly wrapped up with a bow in the Union.
Hmm.
So yeah, I'm curious to see exactly what Tim Foley has in store for us there with that one. What Doctor slash Doctors we will see within it, how that will all play out. Uh, but for now, rather than looking 13 months down the line, how are we feeling about the Union now that, the main saga of Once a Future is wrapped up?
Um, it,
I
it
think
was
that says it all.
yeah, it was good, but it kind of it sums up Once and Future for me. It had its moments, and that was it. It was that's kind of Once and Future in a nutshell, really for me. It had its moments of greatness, and then yeah, I've kind of feel a bit lukewarm on
Yeah,
it
I
all,
know what you
really.
mean. So it's somewhat soured Once a Future overall for me. Although I do appreciate some parts of it more. I'll be curious to see how it all stands up on re-listen. Now that we know mostly everything that's been going on here, we don't know what the coda might turn on its head. But yeah, certainly, yeah, like you, lukewarm really about this and
Yeah.
about it all because we got answers, but it feels more like it was just a mystery box throughout the run of the series, really. And
I
then this is where the mystery box is opened. This is where it's all been building to and gets revealed. But then there's not really much beyond that. It's more just here's your answers, and that's about it, really.
Yeah, I think as well there was no sort of overall consequences for like the universe, and I don't even though the Doctor's having this sort of degeneration,
It
it
feels
didn't.
quite small scale overall, doesn't it?
Yeah, and like it didn't really seem to affect him. Like it wasn't like it was worsening as the series progressed. It kind of yeah, it didn't really seem to have much of an effect on the Doctor really. Like it didn't do much for him
No,
really.
you sort of like had that threat possibility early on about the, Doctor's very existence being a threat if he goes all the way back. But yeah, it doesn't necessarily play out that way here. There's sort of the threat of it getting worse and it driving him mad, but
But you never get that in like the other little stories going, crikey, I need to get this sorted if this is
yeah,
what
there's
I'm
no
going to
real,
become.
there's little urgency across the whole series. It very much is just a series of one-off stories using this premise, occasionally dropping hints at what's to come or setting
Yeah.
up little things, but it's very much like side quest stuff, isn't it?
Yes, that's the
Like,
formula. It's kind of here's the Doctor getting a little sidetrack with regeneration from a previous Doctor. Oh, here's your main Doctor. I must find this character, stabilize myself. Oh,
mm,
you must find this. Oh no, I've got to regenerate again now. Off I go on the next. That's kind of the formula of the stories, really.
yeah, so many of them are standalone. And so when you've got this being very arc loaded,
Hmm.
it leaves a lot of expectations there and very much pins this as the one that's holding it all together. This is what it lives and dies by, in a way. And Matt Fitton has done well with stories like that before. Like Dalek Universe very much came together with his two-part finale. Like that cliffhanger for the Dalek defense is still a absolute banger. And I love that moment of clarity afterwards where you're like, oh, this is what it's all about now. And I think, another Big Finish series that had that effect was Stranded for me. In
Hmm.
Stranded 4, how certain reveals in that about how all things fit together. So it's not like there isn't a precedent with Big Finish for having these overarching stories that at times feel a bit all over the place. But then once you finish it and you look back, you realise, that's what it was going for.
Yes.
And I just did not get that here, sadly. I mean, I saw there was one thing I approve of, and one thing that I think, I take back some of my criticisms in retrospect about the handling of the initial degeneration and how that all comes into play here. Thematically, I think that works. Again, I can't go too much into detail there without spoiling things, but I like thematically what that has to say. I just wish it had hit a bit more when it all happened, when it all came together here. Because, again, it's another episode where you've got characters coming back. You've got Susan, of course, and River, which two great choices. And again, it's the Doctor's once in the form of Susan, that's his past, and then it's the Doctor's future in the form of River, being, his wife from the future, or his personal future, of course, at this point.
Yes. And
so that feels quite thematically strong. And River is fairly well dealt in this, I think, at least early on. But Susan, I don't know how much she really gets to do.
I think she's window dressing. I think she's going, hey, here's the Doctor's granddaughter. It's the 60th anniversary. I'm glad that she's got some involvement in the 60th, even though we haven't seen what Russell's got planned. If this is it, I'm glad that she's been included in it.
Yeah, and it's wonderful getting scenes between her and Tom Baker, because the 8th Doctor and the 4th Doctor are sort of co-piloting in this one, aren't they?
I would say Tom's more the main Doctor. It kind of feels a bit Power of the Doctor-esque in the sense that it's kind of the other Doctors piloting it rather than sort of the 8th Doctor in a way.
Yeah, the 8th Doctor does get slightly underserved. And certainly it all goes a bit more berserk later on as well in the story. Like, I think he gets a lot of the punchier moments later on, but nevertheless, I think of the classic Doctors in this series, he is the one who has been the least served, because he's not even been in any of the
no
up to this point. Like, all the degeneration stuff has been flicking between Doctors 1 to 7. So this is the first time we've had the 8th Doctor turn up. And it's odds that he is ended up sharing. Makes you wonder, is he going to be in the coda to balance it out at all?
Yeah.
I
mean, we're not exactly short of McGann content this year, so it's not much of a criticism. But yeah,
it's very true. But certainly does feel a bit unfair on him, I suppose, in terms of this being the 60th anniversary, but at the same time it is the longest as well, so maybe he does have it does even out when you look at run times or whatever, just simply on a piece of paper. But certainly the impression I got, the way it feels to me, is that McGann was slightly underserved here.
I mean, go on.
I am glad we got Tom Baker though with Susan, because part of me was feeling that it was just going to be McGann and Susan, because with this series they like to revisit these old partnerships that they've already had rather than doing new ones, because obviously we have them two together in the 8th Doctor Adventures and Susan's War. But no, it's wonderful having Tom with Susan, having him and Carol interact, and I think those seem rather magical,
especially when they reunite. That's really quite heartwarming and quite special.
His reaction to her.
And the journey they go on, because this is it links back to an unearthly child in some degree, which is quite nice. Yeah,
but at the same time, that felt a bit window dressing again.
It's
like it could have been anything. And for me, despite this being quite a long one, it feels rather thin on plot. Like, I never really feel that much oomph from this story. Like, it doesn't feel like it's trying to grab me and engage me, except for its mystery boxes, which it again teases out across the story, and you've already guessed them about halfway through. Sometimes that's not a bad thing. I think if the story's strong and you're engaged, then you don't mind that you've already guessed the twist, because it's whetting your appetite, isn't it?
Yes.
You're waiting for that release of the reveal. Whereas with this, I felt like I was more tapping my toes, going, "Come on, tell me what it is. I've already guessed it. Just outright say it, so we can actually get to it and enjoy whatever thematic stuff can come from that. But
Yeah.
sorry, what were you going to say?
I was going to say, like, the first half an hour mark. Well, the half an hour mark is kind of where the story stops, I would say, where you kind of get, okay, that's where it is, and then it's kind of how do you deal with the union itself after, and that's kind of it's a bit of a runaround, really.
Yeah, I definitely get that vibe, sadly. And it does feel like it's just there to tie up the arc of this series overall, which again just lets the whole thing down a bit. But at the same time, I do think it ties up neatly. Like, yes. I think it's improved past lives ever so slightly in retrospect. Like how it weaves back into that. But at the same time, I think it's let down once a future overall a bit. Because it feels like there's a lot of style here, but not much substance. But at the same time, there's also not much style in the sense that it never feels that bombastic, I suppose. It never feels truly celebratory and huge in the same way that something like Light at the End did. The way that was written, the sound design, everything that went into that felt like this huge event. This just feels like business as usual, but with a slightly odd twist. I never got that same anniversary kick from this series.
It has a moment, because I think what the story's trying to do, it's going, this is the message of the Doctor, that, you know, they're all united.
Yeah.
But because they're flicking through, because the Doctor's flicking through all the regenerations, you don't get the sense of unitedness, because it's kind of, they're not all together, all as one, you know, in a room. Like like the end of the Five Doctors when they're confronting Barusa. It's not that level of, go on, kick his ass. Yeah.
I mean, speaking of his ass, or her ass in this case, we have the villain, the Union, played by Maureen O'Brien. What did you make of her?
I think that was...
Without too many spoilers.
I think it was a nice callback to early Big Finish, with getting, you know, actors who, you know, weren't available because their doctors weren't doing Big Finish for whatever reason. And it's a nice callback to Zagreus, really. I think incorporating those characters in a very different way. Yeah, I think she did a good job, because it's very different to Vicky.
Yeah, we've had it more recently as well with Maureen herself, haven't we? In Last of the Zeta scene from the Ninth Doctor Ventures.
Yes, and obviously
this
Katie
is better
Manning.
Than that.
Yeah, a lot better story than Last of the Zeta scene, and a much better role for Maureen as well, I'd say.
Oh, I think she is brilliant in this role.
It's camp.
It's high camp. Yeah, you could tell she's enjoying getting to do something different from Vicky though, and getting to play the villain, and I think she does it wonderfully. I really enjoyed her involvement in this story.
Yeah.
And I also enjoyed with the extras having her and Carol together and sort of comparing their time as one of the leading ladies of Doctor Who, because they both sort of fit in the same role, didn't they, really? Vicky was very much a surrogate Susan when she came along.
Adopted granddaughter,
Yeah, and so it's interesting them comparing that experience. And, you know, when you have the extended extras, they spend quite a bit of time talking about that, talk about Verity as well, and William Hartnell himself, of course. Like, I think sometimes the extras on these, because of that looking back they go into, can be more entertaining than the stories. Yeah, so certainly those two together is a highlight on the behind the scenes of this one.
Yeah, but yeah, a very different anniversary style and series. I think that it kind of followed the same format as Legacy of Time, really.
I appreciate the attempt to do something different here with the whole degeneration thing, a way to involve multiple Doctors without necessarily it being just a straight up multi-Doctor story.
Because that's the thing, we're so I don't want to say desensitized to multi-Doctor stories, but I think the thing with expanded media is we get it every year, like Out of Time, which I love and I adore. So I guess it made sense for them to go, it's a crafty way of doing a multi-Doctor story, but not labeling it as a multi-Doctor story.
Yeah, and I mean, 60th as well. It's sort of a bit of an odd number anyway, isn't it? Like, it's something that's worth celebrating, but it's not your 50. It's
Yeah.
not your big celebration. It's not your 75. And so I think it makes sense for it to be something a bit different with that. I mean, again, same on TV. They're doing so a bit different and also a bit similar with a old face coming back, although just the one, as far as we know. But yeah, I mean, I think also Light at the End was probably the last time they could get away with something like that for an anniversary. Because like you say, after that, multi-Doctor stories didn't become run-of-the-mill, but it's almost like that is as big as you could go with them.
And I think with the character pool Big Finish have now, they have the new series license, so it's trying to accommodate everyone in that as well.
Yeah, and they certainly has been able to celebrate that much more with the characters they bring in.
Yeah. I mean, we joked about the dartboard, but I think that was the exciting thing of it.
Yeah, and I think also the most exciting Once and Future releases have been the odd combinations, the ones you don't expect, like Martian Invasion of Planetoid 50 and Choose Company. They're not the obvious choices of Fifth Doctor and Jenny or Eighth Doctor and Susan. They're the ones that mix it up a bit more, and I really appreciate them for that.
So I think that's all we could really say on the Union.
Yeah, without going into spoilers, definitely avoid the cast list on bigfinish.com because there are quite a few giveaways in there as to who turns up in this one. So.
There's some nice surprises.
I think one surprise though didn't quite land for me the way it should have done. Like there was a lot of build up to something and I was like, oh, that's what we're going for here. Yeah. No offense to the actor involved, but yeah, it did feel a bit deflating.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's all like the whole thing really, just a bit deflating. A lot of build up and then deflation at the end. Like I appreciate on paper the plot that it builds, the way it leads back into the beginning of Once and Future, but at the same time it just doesn't have much going for it in itself.
Yeah, there's no scale, there's no sort of fallout from events.
There's very little urgency as well. Yeah, I never felt too engaged by the story beyond simply wanting to know what the answer was, what was in the mystery box, which is really what's been driving it from the start. And yeah, it's all after 6 months of it, you're just a bit like, oh, can we get it over with now? Which is a shame because 60th anniversary. This is Big Finish really putting themselves in the spotlight, I suppose. This should be a flagship range of the year, but it feels like they're not putting their best foot forward for it. And I mean, we've heard that it was a logistical nightmare for them, and you know they wanted this to be huge, but the way the stories have played out, I don't think it has felt as huge as they seem to think it is.
I think it fizzled out very quickly. I think in terms of the fanfare from the community, I think people were on board and then they quickly went, is this it? And then kind of probably checked out.
Yeah, it's too similar to their other output in that way, isn't it? Like, you know, Fourth Doctor meeting up with Sarah again, that's something we get anyway.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, it just doesn't feel special enough for, you know, people who listen to Big Finish all the time. And for people who don't listen to Big Finish all the time, I think there's maybe a bit too much Big Finish lore in here that it might be a bit hard for them to get into as well.
Yeah, that is very true.
I mean, what would you give the Union overall?
I'd go 7.
I think I'll go 6 for this one.
I mean, we will be doing a tier list discussing all the Once and Futures what are out and sort of revisiting a few of them as well.
Yeah, because some of them we covered in streams, and so that's like for people who want to just get to our thoughts on those first 3 past lives Artist at the Time and the Genius for War, you'll have to go skipping through a whole load of other stuff that we talked about to actually get to those thoughts. So we thought we'll revisit them. We'll make it easier. Also, update our thoughts as well, because we're
Yeah.
coming at these from the perspective now of knowing what it's leading to. Whereas, I think, in some ways, we were giving them a bit of leeway early on and
Yes.
saying, depending on where this goes, it could improve it in hindsight, or make it feel even more pointless. So, be interesting revisiting them and seeing how that all plays out. But yeah, that's all content that's coming, and of course, we will be reviewing the coda as well.
Yes.
This time next year, or just and in this time next year in a bit.
Yeah.
And who knows, maybe that will somehow change our perspective on Once and Future completely, and it will all make sense to us then. But
It's Tim Foley.
yeah, that's true. I'm still looking forward to it because of that fact.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
as it stands for now, I think I'm sort of like over it. I'm glad we can put Once and Future behind us. I look forward to the 60th specials on TV and what else Big Finish has to offer, because Big Finish does still have a lot of great, exciting stuff coming.
A lot of good stuff still to come.
We'll be reviewing a lot of that in the coming weeks and months, of course.
Yeah.
So I hope to catch you again for another video. Thank you for watching, everyone, and be sure to like, subscribe, comment, all that lovely stuff. Always helps out, always appreciated.
We do. We appreciate it an awful lot. So yeah, thank you everyone, and bye-bye.